So why don't we get some analysis now of what's been on the agenda in Korea, Japan, as well as what lies ahead with the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, that's ASPI, Justin Bassi, is back with us. Welcome again, Justin. So pretty high-level diplomatic talks there in North Asia after the Quad talks in Japan. Penny Wong visited the demilitarised zone and really lashed, I suppose, Russia there. Can we be certain that North Korea actually is presently funneling weapons towards Russia for use in Ukraine? Is that clear?
I think that's an absolute certainty, Greg. I think these partnerships, whether it be North Korea and Russia or China and Russia, absolutely need to be taken seriously. And importantly for us, for Australia, for other democracies, is that we can't afford just to wait until they are announced publicly. We know that North Korea is providing weapons directly to Russia. We also know that Russia has significant space, missile, nuclear expertise that North Korea is interested in. We also know that they have a land border, a rail connection, so it's very hard to stop that type of supply. So calling this type of behaviour out, these agreements out, is very, very important. It's also, though, Greg, important, I think, for the public to have some consistency. We've just had in recent weeks the NATO Secretary General refer to China as the main enabler of Russia's war effort against Ukraine. We need to ensure that all leaders around the world, including here in Australia, don't only call out North Korea, but more regularly call out China for that enablement as well.
And Beijing, are you saying, would be facilitating the flow of weapons?
What we know is that Beijing is providing dual-use goods. So it's important that we don't have such extreme red lines, that we wait until the direct provision of weapons occurs. It should be a threshold in itself that China is providing such dual-use goods, enabling the war's effort. And that's why it was good for the NATO Secretary General to refer publicly to China as the main enabler of Russia's war effort on Ukraine.
All right. What about other features of the Quad talks conducted on the earlier leg there in Tokyo? We got announcements about vigilance on undersea cables from Penny Wong. The US bilaterally with Japan announced some sort of upgrade in military command structures there. What else was achieved in that round of foreign minister talks?
Greg, the Quad is very important for Australia, and there weren't many public practical initiatives. You named a couple of them, but it's actually not what we need to see every single Quad meeting having some new big initiative. It's actually significant in itself that we have Quad leaders or Quad ministers meetings, which is why it was very good to have. We also need to see in 2024 a Quad leaders meeting. So the Quad statement, very useful to read, quite similar to previous Quad statements, which don't call out China specifically, but in some detail go through all the types of destabilising aggressive behaviour in the Indo-Pacific that really only Beijing is doing, particularly in the South and East China Seas. And that's why one of the initiatives announced, a maritime legal dialogue, was very useful to uphold that international rules-based order, because as we know, China in particular is breaching that international rules-based order almost on a daily basis, in particular against the Philippines.
All right. I want to steer you back to some domestic questions, but we'll just go via the Middle East on the way. Of course, tensions remain very high there as Israel weighs its retaliation against Hezbollah. How certain are you that that will be proportionate, and would a strike into Beirut qualify as such?
I don't think any party in the Middle East wants an all-out regional war. But we do have to remember that Hezbollah is a listed terrorist organisation. It has been attacking Israel since Hamas attacked Israel in October last year. To a certain extent, Greg, Israel has shown restraint in relation to its northern border, not wanting to fight on multiple fronts. But it does need to respond to this attack. The likelihood is that we'll see a response, a strong response, but one in which will be controlled in a way that attempts to avoid an all-out regional war. I think, though, it's a real lesson, Greg. We have to ensure that we learn from history. We're not dealing with fellow democracies that respond to reciprocal good faith initiatives or behaviour from us. We're dealing with terrorist organisations or authoritarian regimes, and we have to make sure that we treat them as such and don't just think that a short-term deal is going to be anything more than a short-term reprieve. And we've got to make sure that we deter both the authoritarian regimes like Iran and their proxies like their terrorist organisations in Hamas and Hezbollah.
Yep, all right. Point made. I know that the Australian government's obviously worried, as are others, because the travel warnings are at elevated levels right now.
Not even the Lebanese foreign minister is able to control Hezbollah. He actually said publicly that Lebanon could not control Hezbollah. It's a real problem.
Yep. Let's bring it back home if we can, Justin. Bassi, ASIO and where it stands in the administrative structures here in Canberra. It was affected by the reshuffle and its move out of the Home Affairs portfolio back into Attorney General's. Dennis Richardson was on the program with us yesterday. Now, he's rather relaxed about that. Are you?
Yeah, I'm relatively relaxed. Prime Ministers have got to be comfortable with the structures around them, and machinery of government changes happen regularly. But I do think it's worth asking why these changes happen. In 2017, when the Home Affairs Department was established, we had a revolution in technology, issues like 5G, which hadn't cropped up before. We had the rise of ISIL, we had the rise of China, we had foreign interference, new issues that we needed structures to account for. Here, the question is what is the change, what's the failure or the trend that we're seeing? I only see ASIO hunting down spies, countering foreign interference and terrorism. So it's an interesting question to ask. I also think that ASIO's separation from the First Law Officer makes more sense to me. Having had direct involvement in both AGD and the security agencies, what we're now asking again of the Attorney General is to be both the Security Minister, who must make a security assessment, and then switch hats to make sure that legals are answered as well. It is inconsistent with our close partners, the US and UK, who separate that. Have the Security Minister make that security decision and then have the legal question and the warrants answered by the Attorney General. Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on that. That is a quite contrary view to the one that Dennis Richardson expressed, and that's okay. It's good to have robust discussion on this. Justin, Bassi, much more we could cover today. We might save some on our list for another occasion, but thanking you once again. We'll get you back very soon, I promise. Pleasure.